She woke up, a bright ring of light shining in her eyes. Then the world opened up and air rushed into her space. She blinked her eyes. There a large, handsome face peered down at her. It had large brown eyes and floppy, hairy ears. He had large horns on the sides of his head. He smiled and put his hand into her space. "Rise, my sister. There is a feast waiting for you." She took his proffered hand and let him pull her upright. She was about to start asking questions when he put his hand on her back and started helping her out. "Do not worry. Everything you wish to know will be answered through those doors." He pointed toward 2 large doors on the opposite end of the room. She got up and started walking toward them. She could hear him behind her. "Rise, my brother. There is a feast waiting for you." She didn't turn around, but continued through the door. She stepped out into a room full of greenery. Trees, vines, leaves hung from the walls. There in the middle of the long room was a table covered in foods of all sorts. Around the table sat several creatures. They felt familiar, and then she looked at herself. They were like her. She looked back up and one motioned to her to come over, smiling. She walked over and sat beside him. "Hello. Welcome. Where are we?" she asked. He reached over to a stack of black slates and grabbed one. He pulled it toward him and hit something on it. It activated, and he handed it to her. "It's in English. You should be able to read it." He pointed around the long table at the others like them. "We are all reading about this place. Feel free to look through and join the conversation." She nodded and looked down at the tablet. It glowed with a red dot on a floating space station. It was labeled, "You are here." She looked up as another of her kind stepped through the doors. It was a him, brown, white, and black. She smiled, and he smiled back. "What is going on?" he asked. She laughed and waved him over. He approached her, smiling. She handed him her tablet and pulled another from the stack. The table slowly filled, the young ones eating, talking, and learning. All the while Asterion stood at the door watching with a smile. Sam stood in the ship bay next to the newly outfitted Bethany II. A Fuimos, Crackletooth in his void suit, and 4 Scribbler Knights stood in front of him. "Each of you has worked hard this last week. We have pumped you full of all the info and training we could, but this mission is deemed urgent." Sam looked over his data file. "Your wills have been filed." He looked up at Crackletooth. "You chose to be reconstituted upon failure, is that correct?" Crackletooth bobbed his ears. Sam looked back down. "The rest of you are content with permanent death." The Scribblers nodded in their war rigs. The Fuimos waved its front arms. "I am content," it said through Sam's translator. Sam looked over the Bethany too. "Fuimos, your piloting skills have proven phenomenal. Your siblings? What do you call them?" The Fuimos waved. "Do not concern yourself. I do not worry about how to address your follicles or your blood." Sam nodded. "Well, the others of you, do they possess the same skill set?" "It is innate in us. We can see and process quite fast. You know this. You hire us for your cameras to ease your purple boy." Sam nodded. "I didn't think it would lend itself to piloting. Guess it makes sense." Sam looked down at the data file. "Sons of Fet." He looked up at the Scribblers. "You each excelled in your combat training. I hope you don't have to use it. This is purely a recon mission, but I thank you for volunteering to offer your protection." The Scribblers looked at one another and had their rigs fist bump. Sam walked up to Crackletooth. "Good luck, my friend. Your skills will prove vital on this mission." Crackletooth held out 2 of his fists. Sam bumped them. "Good luck, soldiers. The Kawaru and Twain are counting on you." The knights bowed slightly. "For Twain," they said in unison. Sam watched as they entered the Bethany too. Fuimos ran through the systems checks and then lifted off. Slowly the ship floated through the massive ship bay. It went past the Tsar and 3 other smaller ships under construction. It neared the end of the bay, and the shield doors opened. A field kept the light atmosphere in while the shuttle entered the void. "Be safe," Sam whispered to himself. Light years away, on Sparrow, a herd of grazers walked the newly planted fields, many with young on their backs. A large male walked through, gingerly avoiding the seedlings. He took notes on plant size and growth rates. The others around him gently poured nutrient water on the small plants. He noted progress. An Infinigan engineer in breather suit walked the high catwalks of the terraformer. Massive billows of steam and atmosphere issued forth from the deep wells carved into the planet by the box spiders. He paused his work and watched as the box spiders were currently erecting another 3 massive greenhouses on the horizon nearby. A lab full of grazer-raised preservers was full of experiments. The preservers were handing off beakers to one another, pulling test kits, running machines, and all in fluid unison. Dam and Shineless stood watching as the new factory came to life. The Karawu crew had started the machinery, and now molten alloy was flowing into the fabricators. Shineless leaned into her mate's shoulder. "You've been quiet." Dam sighed through his nose. "I'm worried." "The Galak? We might be poking the bear." "What's a bear?" she asked. "A big earth carnivore," he said. "Doesn't sound like a good idea to poke." "You get it." Shineless watched the Karawu work the presses. "He's going to need all the help he can get then." Dam hugged her with one arm gently. "We have a world waking up to help him." "What do you think of Click-Click's plan?" He looked at her and kissed the top of her head. "Orbit and Novacore seem to be functioning all right. I bet it'll be like them, but bigger." She looked up at Dam. "What does it mean for an AI to be bigger?" Dam shrugged. "Faster?" She looked back out at the factory at work. "I hope we can save more of them. They're a funny people." Dam smiled. "I like how they move. They hop like weak fleas." "What's a flea?" Dam sighed. Deep under the surface of Sparrow Click-Click and her Infinigan clan finished hooking up the legion of data racks. The racks connected into the transmitters that now littered the planet. Click-Click waved her hands to everyone around the room. Curator walked up to the third of the Margot cerulean crystals. She placed her hands on the processor and begun running operations. The crystal lit up, emitting a deep, oceanic, glimmering blue light. The racks lit up. Box spiders around Sparrow paused for a moment. Then a dim black and white hologram appeared. It was taller than Curator, human, and dressed in a butler's suit and tie. "Erebus reporting in for duty. How can I help you?" Curator gave a curtsy. "There are 2 humans on the other side of the world who need your help. Please report to them promptly." The hologram bowed. "Doing so now." Then it disappeared. Greenfeet, his wife, and 6 children were sitting around the center table in the cornucopia. He had just received a promotion to management and was celebrating. He raised his hands, waving at the waitstaff. The grazer approached. "Yes, sir? Were you wanting another round of clams?" His kids waved an enthusiastic, "Yes, please. Please, Dad?" Greenfeet looked them over. "Another round of clams, yes, and what did the chef have planned for dessert?" She widened her eyes. "Well, sir, I can go ask him." The female grazer went back to the kitchen. A moment later, she returned with a tray of boiled clams. The Stickian children shivered with excitement and tore into them. Greenfeet's eyes turned blue with happiness. Another grazer walked up behind the waitress. "Hello, sir. I am to understand you are having a celebration?" "Yes. I am the station's new job placement coordinator." Greenfeet looked around the table. "We are happy family. We have much more now." The grazer bobbed its head. "This is good. Well, I am Ufief. I have been your chef this evening. I was told you wanted to try some desserts." "Yes." Greenfeet waved. "What is your best dessert?" Ufifet knelt next to the table and stared at Greenfeet. "The preserver made a special plant, straight from the earth. I have experimented with the fruit of this plant. I found a recipe hidden in the ancient human files and made the most exquisite of desserts. My family have enjoyed it immensely, but it has been a secret of ours until perfected." Greenfeet chittered his mandibles while waving his hands. "Is it perfected? Is it safe to eat?" Ufief looked at the waitress behind him, and then back at Greenfeet. "It is. I would be honored if you were the first to try it in its final form. Your tastes are different than Grazer's, so I don't know if you will like it. It is an experiment. Do you wish to try?" Greenfeet looked around his family. They all waved an enthusiastic, "Yes, let's eat it." Greenfeet gave the approval. Ufief returned a moment later with a tray. Inside the tray was a yellow layer with a white dust on it. Ufiev set it down in front of Greenfeet. Greenfeet reached in, pulling a square free. He slowly put it into his mandibles, moving them, scissoring the square while his tongues pulled pieces inside to be ground up. He waved his other hands. "This is amazing! This is best!" The wife and children too their cue and started grabbing pieces. The tray was quickly devoured. Greenfeet pulled the chef close. "What was this? This was amazing! You are sitting on the next clam. I want more of this!" Ufiev bowed. "I am glad you enjoyed the lemon squares. I will tell my family to start more of the trees. I thank you for being our testers." Greenfeet waved frantically. "We thank you. The tribe will be jealous." The Bethany II exited jump space at the edge of the Kawaru home system. Fuimos piloted the small craft around the backside of a frozen moon. "Dropping rift beacon," Crackletooth said. In 3, 2, 1 inch, he pulled a lever and the Bethany II shifted. Rift beacon deployed. Activating. He flipped a switch and hit a big red button on the screen. "Telemetry is focused." Crackletooth looked over the display. "Ping sent. We are transmitting. Activating secure band." Fuimos had one of its feathery eye stalks looking through a high-optic telescope aimed in system. "I see Kawaru Prime." Pulling it up on screen. The 4 sons of Fet shifted in their rigs to look at their monitors. The world was gray, most of it covered in smoke. Tiny dots of fire were visible on its surface. Numerous massive objects floated around it. Chakrafet spoke up. "Are those black shapes craft?" Fuimos responded. "Yes, numerous craft. I can see smaller craft detaching and entering the atmosphere. The planet looks like it's covered in a film. It has a sheen to it." "Video feed transmitting," Crackletooth said. "Are we able to get closer? Our primary goal is to ascertain the fate of the Kawaru." Fuimos waved a feather. "Taking us in, prepare for a short jump." The Bethany II shimmered and sprung forward across the system. They rounded the homeworld's moon, staying at the edge of its gravity well. The Kawaru's star shone light around the edge of the moon, glinting off the black hull of their ship. I got numerous lines of comm chatter. Crackletooth held a speakerphone to his head. "I am recording it all. Most of this is Gallic, sending it back to the beacon for Orbit to decipher." Crackletooth bobbed his ears. "I got him. There is Kawaru alive." He looked around the craft. "What do you think? Should I make contact?" The scribblers nodded. Fuimos focused several eyes on Crackletooth. "It is why we signed on. Go ahead. I have engines at the ready." Crackletooth aimed the communications array at the world. "Come in, Kawaru Prime." A crackling chirp echoed through the radio. "This is Kathu broadcaster Fiadi. You are not Gallic. Be warned, this system is being devoured. Flee while you still can." "What is your current situation?" Crackletooth responded. "Do not worry about us. We are concerned for you. We are doomed. All other cities are devoured. Kathu is the last, and our geoplant is being undermined. We will be devoured soon, too. Fly far, traveler. This system is doomed." "How long until your power plant is destroyed? How are they destroying it? We may be able to help." "We have only a few days. They are burrowing to the magma head. Our shields still hold and our cannons still fire, but they will go dark when they reach it. We are doomed. There is no help. Flee. Do not lead them to your worlds. They will devour you too." Crackletooth looked at his crew. Fuimos was looking through the viewer. "I see the city. I think this is Kathu." It put the city in question on the screens for them to see. "See the energy spikes? They are continuously firing." Chakrafet pointed at the screen. "What is that tall thing? It is orbital, is it not?" Crackletooth bobbed his ears. "Fiadi, do you have a star ladder in your city?" "Yes," the Kawaru replied. "But the top is controlled by the Gallic. The elevator is locked. They cannot come down and our shields prevent them from getting in any other way. We are holding, at least until the power is dead." Crackletooth saw possibilities. Fuimos pivoted the ship. "Incoming." A cruiser rounded the moon, darting towards them. Fuimos kicked on the burners and launched the Bethany II toward the moon surface, cruising over the rocky celestial body. The Gallic ship gave pursuit. They darted between barren mountain rises. The cruiser closed in, hovering at speed over them. The Bethany, too, started slowing, and then stopped. It was being drawn in towards the cruiser. 3 lines of cabling latched on with powerful magnet tips. Fuimos watched through the cameras as numerous creatures landed on the hull. The Fett brothers looked at each other and nodded. The 4 war rigs entered the ship's airlock and exited onto the hull. They were met promptly by laser fire from the Galak raiders. Chakra Fett pulled up his shield immediately, protecting his brothers. China Fett readied his shoulder guns and began blasting. 2 Galaks took blasts in the chest, sending them flying off the craft. Bento Fett charged, light spears swinging. The remaining 3 Galak dodged, but one was sliced across an appendage. The severed arm floated, strings reaching out trying to reattach it. Bento Fett dodged as one of the Galak fired at him, rolling across the shuttle, using the maglocks across his rig to keep him from falling off. He then lunged, striking the light spear into the core of the one shooting. He raised the tip, cutting the creature in 2. It fell of the side. Basfet took the opportunity to ready his back cannon. He lifted it over his head, aiming at the cruiser far above them. He configured his cold core power supply to feed directly into the weapon. He charged up the side capacitors and fired. It hit true. The gravity field pulling them stopped. The cables went limp, but then started getting tight again as they were reeled in. Bento Fett swung the light spear around him. Chakra Fett charged with his shield. China Fett kept up suppressing fire. The light spear severed one of the magnecables. The 2 remaining Galak grabbed onto Chakra Fett, stabbing with sabers of their own. One punctured his face shield, opening his cockpit to void. Chakra Fett used his last moment to dive off of the Bethany 2, dragging the 2 Galak bodies to the moon below. Bento Fett swung the spear around his body, severing the last 2 cables. A blast from the cruiser above rocked the shuttle. China Fett was thrown off in a cascade of fire and metal. Fuimos took the liberty and fired the thrusters, catapulting the ship away from the cruiser. Basfet readied another blast. He watched as the cruiser started gaining again. Basfet nodded to his remaining brother. For Twain. Bento Fett nodded back. The 2 brothers jumped up. Their bodies floated across the gap toward the approaching cruiser. They activated their mag boots. Their war rigs skidded across the hull, and both locked on moments before flying past the far end. Basfet steadied himself and looked where they had landed. The massive thrusters were off to their right. Galak were already coming out of openings in the hull. Bento Fett looked at his brother. Our names await the high wall. Basfet nodded and primed his cannon, aiming it at the engine. Bento Fett charged the oncoming Galak, swinging the light spear around. It connected, cutting across 3 of the charging creatures. Basfet fired. The blast hit the engine, causing a cascading explosion across the entirety of the cruiser. Fuimos kept the camera feeds on as long as possible. Crackletooth transmitted it all to the beacon. Crackletooth hung his head to the side. They saved us. Fuimos fired up the jump drive. I hope it was worth it. It flicked the jump switch, and the shuttle leapt back toward Twain. Patricia Jonsdottir watched the feed on the private Senate server. She watched the alien species piloting a human-designed ship as they attempted a spy mission. You are picking stupid fights, Sam, she said to herself in her quiet office. She wrote down the transmission frequencies and copied the Rift beacon schematics to a nail drive. She got up and turned off the display. She lifted the nail drive up and looked at it. The Heilung need to see,